what about those dark, difficult feelings? What we tend to do is we tend to neglect them,
Yeah.
put them, and not really to think about them. And what I do in my work is I focus on those difficult feelings because I find that there's so much value in those feelings. And really, mothering is about all our feelings. And in those dark, difficult ones, this is where we really understand ourselves and our children.
You are not going to love every moment of motherhood, that you don't have to do love every moment. And you can say that it's okay that you need space, or you can say it's okay that I want to spend every moment with my kid. That okaying of the feeling makes you more light. And I think also lets you tap into that intuition that I think me and you both know that moms have, but they
Yes.
lose because of this comparison and this judgment for self, I think.
What we want to teach our children is it's okay to have these feelings, and although we don't have to go into detail with our children exactly how we feel. I think we need to mark it and to say, today I'm feeling a little off, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Mum's still here, but I might need a little bit of time to gather myself. I'm a bit irritated. Just to, of course, to do it at a level that's appropriate for their age, but to teach them that it's okay to have all these feelings.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. If you are tuning in, you are on my YouTube channel, and we are so excited to see this channel continue to grow. And the only way it grows is if you subscribe, hit that thumbs up sign on any videos that you like, including these incredible conversations I get to have with the most amazing guests on the show. And I think every podcast host should say that, but I really do believe it, that I get to have the most amazing conversations with the most insightful human beings out there. And today's guest is one of those people. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Margo Lowy, a psychotherapist, researcher, and author specializing in maternal mental health, a topic that is so important to me, not only because I'm a mom, but because I meet a lot of moms in my office. And we're going to talk about something called maternal ambivalence. Her new book, Maternal Ambivalence, is out in 2025. The Loving Moments and Bitter Truths of Motherhood is a powerful exploration of the conflicting emotions that often come with motherhood: love, joy, resentment, guilt, even rage, and why naming those feelings doesn't make you a bad mom, but a human one. We're going to talk about that cultural discomfort, so much more. But first, I just want to welcome Dr. Lowy. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Mona. That was a great introduction. You kind of got everything in there, and I'm sure that's going to nourish our conversation. So I'm
Well,
really excited to meet you, and thank you.
Well, I'm so glad. Your team had reached out. I always like to explain to my listeners. I sometimes pitch for people to come on, and then sometimes I have a form that people can ask if they want to come on the show. And I think we got an email or a form submission. I was like, this is such an important topic, and I love that word ambivalence. And so I would love to ask you, how did you get into the work of maternal ambivalence, and why is that word so powerful in the work that you do?
Okay. How I got into it was an interesting story. I wanted to find something about mothering that was different, and this was in the early 2000s when I did a master's in 1997 on infertility,
Mm. Oh,
and
wow.
then I work as a psychotherapist, and my third child was just entering her last years of school, so I really wanted to be around for her. And so I decided that I wanted to do my PhD. And I was scouting around for something a little different about mothering because the field is, as we know, saturated. And I was looking and looking, and I found a book by Dr. Rosika Parker about maternal ambivalence. And I decided this was such a great topic. And she was talking about her book was called Mother Love, Mother Hate
Mm.
originally, and then she changed the title, and this is really what grabbed me about her work was that she was delving into something that we don't really talk about, which is the difficult feelings of mothering. And when I saw her book, I thought, yeah, That's it. So I did a lot of work around that area, and where I am now with my latest book is I'm reframing mothering, and I'm disrupting mothering in the what I want to do is I want to encourage mothers not only to engage with all their feelings, their
Yeah.
loving feelings and their bitter feelings, their rage and their happiness, their isolation and their getting together with other people. I want
Yeah.
to encourage mothers and to normalize the fact that we have all these feelings. Not only that, but what my work is really also about is what about those dark, difficult feelings? What we tend to do is we tend to neglect them,
Yeah.
put them, and not really to think about them. And what I do in my work is I focus on those difficult feelings because I find that there's so much value in those feelings. And really, mothering is about is about all our feelings, and in those dark difficult ones, this is where we really understand ourselves and our children, and these feelings are not something to be fixed. There's
Yeah.
something that we need to learn from. So that's really what I'm talking about. So I want to normalize all these feelings in a processed way. That's what it is. And ambivalence is such an interesting concept because ambivalence is really misunderstood. When we think about ambivalence, first of all, people often confuse it with indifference.
Mhm.
I think it's because they're longish words, they've got the same number of letters, but indifference is so different. Indifference is a cutting off.
Yeah.
It's when we're as mothers, we can't stand it anymore,
Mhm.
so difficult, and we cut off. Ambivalence is something so different. Ambivalence encourages us to keep engaged, to keep connected with our feelings and our children. And that's the difference. Also, ambivalence is sometimes blended feelings, mixed feelings. That just doesn't give it the power. How I see ambivalence is something that's really able to connect us with our joyful feelings about mothering and the very dark, difficult ones.
I love that you differentiated those 2 terms, and that is why, I think that's such a powerful way to open this episode, that difference between ambivalence and indifference, because I hear that all the time with people without people having to define those words, right? And I think we'll talk about how that guilt shows up because we feel like if we're feeling ambivalent, which is completely healthy, that then I'm not a loving mother, I'm indifferent, which is what is not the case here. And my show here is a parenting podcast. So, of course, I don't have just mothers listening. I have fathers, I have other caregivers, I maybe have childhood educators that may not be parents. But the reason why I wanted you on the show is that so many of my listeners are women or have mothers in their life that are going to be feeling these feelings. And so I think normalizing it is so key. And it's so interesting to me, Dr. Margo, because in parenting, we talk so much about okaying the feeling, right? That all feelings are normal, that your child is going to have these big feelings of sadness, fear, frustration. Maybe they'll have some resentment in the future or guilt in the future. That's something that's very valid. These are human emotions. Yet, as mothers, we sometimes forget to look after ourselves and the very normal feelings. And you mentioned it beautifully that so many of us were raised with the belief that good mothers are selfless, always joyful, never conflicted, that I have to be this always present, joyful person in my child's life. And in that sort of mentality, what are some of the hidden impacts of repressing more difficult emotions like anger, resentment, and why are you on this mission to normalize these feelings so that women feel more seen?
Okay. When you say that, that's a very important part of my work. And what comes to mind straight away is we have to be genuine
Hmm.
for ourselves and for our children. We all know, as mums, our children know exactly what's going on. If we're not being honest about ourselves, they pick it up straight away and they run with
Absolutely. Yeah.
it. That's that's a big part of it,
Yeah.
because really what we want to teach our children is it's okay to have these feelings, and although we don't have to go into detail with our children exactly how we feel. I think we need to mark it and to say, today I'm feeling a little off, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Mum's still here, but I might need a little bit of time to gather myself. I'm a bit irritated, just to, of course, to do it at a level that's appropriate for their age, but to teach them that it's okay to have all these feelings. But of course, more importantly than that, is for us to be truthful to ourselves,
Mm.
and that it's we are human beings. And there's something about when we become mothers that we think that we're going to be perfect.
Yeah.
And it's such a myth. And it's actually really funny when you think about it, because why would we be perfect? Why would we want to be perfect? But there is something in us, we collude with it, and in society, that we are, as you said, we're meant to be selfless. We're meant to be 24/7 on. And it's like crazy that we think about our mothering like that, but we do. And there is something about us in mothers, as mothers, we need to think about this, because we're human. And in order to kind of, as I say, show up every day, which we have to do as mothers and we
Yeah.
want to do, we have to give ourselves a break. We've got to actually be okay with being what I call enough, which
Yeah.
means that we we try our best, but we understand that mothering is messy and interrupted and loving, and that we all as mums do the best that we can, but we actually muddle through. And the other part of it, which is so core to what I do, is that we have to see our mothering as making mistake and learning from it, and making mistakes and learning, because that's really the only way that we're going to learn about ourselves from our own lived experience. So in order to do that, we can't see ourselves as perfect. We need to see ourselves as human, and that we make mistakes. And that is what it is. That's what all life is about. But with mothering, it's so important, because every day we have these almost tests of ourselves. And
Absolutely.
we need to how do we pass these tests? We don't pass them by being perfect, and we don't pass them by being critical of ourselves. We pass them by being okay with what we do, and seeing what how we might like make how we might want to make it better next time. That's how we learn. And I think if we also are able to pat ourselves on the back when we do something positive, that's good. And as mothers, we're not good at that.
Yeah.
We kind of get on to the next thing, instead of like saying to ourselves, that was really good,
Yeah.
did that well. And we don't do that enough. And also, while I'm talking to you, I'm going back also to what really pushed me to write this book. When I first became a mum nearly 45 years ago,
Wow.
it was a long time ago.
Yeah.
I kind of thought a lot about what mothering would mean to me. And I had this illusion that it would be a sense of union with this
Mm.
longed for child, and it would be wonderful. And that my child would be part of me. And I so clearly remember when my first child was probably about 18 months, I realized he was actually separate from me. And it was a bit of a shock.
Yeah.
I realized that he's got his own personality, and his own ways. And I think that part of this for me is recognizing that our children are different, and that's okay. And so part of writing this book was to normalize all these feelings and also to act as a guide for new mums, because I would have liked that book. I would have liked a book at that time that dispelled some of the myths that we talked about mothering, that we need to be selfless, that we need to be all compassionate. The truth is, we are selfless, and we're not selfless. We're compassionate,
Yeah.
and we're not compassionate. We have guilt, and we don't have guilt. We have all these emotions, and they're all right, and they're all ours, and we really need to claim them. So, this book is about encouraging us all as mothers to claim these feelings. And now that I'm a little older, I really wanted to write this book for all mums, because it goes along the whole continuum of mothering. I think when one is at the early mothering stages, it is more difficult.
Yeah.
It's like a shock, but at all stages in mothering, we're all learning. And as a grandmother now, I'm still learning, and in awe, really at the moment, watching my daughter-in-laws mother their children, and I really I really think it's wonderful to watch them and not to put my ways of mothering onto them, but really to learn from them. And sometimes it's a little scary because I think,
Yeah.
I've done that. Why couldn't have I been that patient or that be like that? And that's okay. But it's like learning about mothering is such a it just continues and continues and continues. And whenever I speak to people, I just learn more.
Yeah. Well, I love being a forever learner, and I can tell that. And I love that you're providing this personal experience. You're becoming a mother 45 years ago, but also the story you mentioned about other leaders in this area and other books that have been out there. And we're still having these conversations. You know, I still feel like the work that you're doing is important, and obviously the book that you wrote is valuable. But why do we think that this still exists, and especially for mothers? Do we think that fathers are more okay feeling ambivalent and it's culturally normal? Or where do you think this sort of friction is lying, or why we still need to do this work? Generations have passed and it's still an issue.
Well, I think that first of all, let me go to the fathers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that many people have asked me, do fathers have ambivalence?
Hmm.
And it's so fascinating. I had a launch for my book in Australia, and the first four questions after I opened and talked about my book were from men.
Mm.
So I think that men kind of may feel a bit excluded, and who's going to write their book? And I think this is really important. I think that men would have feelings. They would have joyful feelings and difficult feelings. It's just that I think for a mother, whether you bear your child yourself, or if you don't bear the child but you rear the child, there's something about being a mother. Well, if I talk about someone who's born the child themselves,
Hmm.
it's such an unbelievable bond that you have with this child. You're pregnant with the child, and you go through these feelings while you're going through your pregnancy. There's feelings of wonderment, and there's also difficulty. You
Yeah.
might have morning sickness, and you might be exhausted, and you're kind of wondering what's happening to your body. You kind of know, but until you actually experience it, you don't know. And then there's the experience of birth, and sometimes that's wonderful, and often that's really difficult and really traumatic. And then you're thrown into the mothering. And the thing is, we kind of we don't really get the heads up on
Yeah.
what this really is. And even the idea of a birth plan, the idea that it's going to, okay, I think that we do, mums today especially are given a birth plan, and they're given permission not to actually go with the birth plan. But even the thought that there's a plan about birth is like, it amazes me because really the plan is we need to go with whatever happens.
Right.
It's, it's the same with mothering. The mothering plan is
Yeah.
we need to go with it. We need to flow with it. And that's the other very important part of my work is we have these rigid ideals about how it's going to be, but what the real message is, let's flow with it. And I don't know how many children you have, whether you have one or more, but
2. Yeah.
two. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
you would realize that each child is different. I mean,
Absolutely.
first you're different at every stage,
Yep.
and we are facing different issues at every stage. And the other thing is every child is different, and that's what's so wonderful. But we have to adjust to every different child and to every situation. So how can we have rigid ways of dealing with them? We're just muddling through and doing the best we can. And I think that that's also such an important message for mums, that we are all muddling through, that we none of us have the answer. And that's what's so wonderful about it. But equally, it's scary because there is no real um, guide for
Absolutely.
how we do it. And we just have to know that that's okay. And
And I love that. You know, you've mentioned that twice already, which I think is so powerful about having to learn as we go. And I think part of that is how we become better at what we do, right? It's like a job. Like, and I'm not saying obviously this is the one of the hardest jobs we have, but like in a corporate job or in any other job, you're not going to keep asking someone to help you with every little thing, right? You're going to ask for the major help from someone maybe, like if you're stuck, but you're going to learn through trial and error. You're going to learn through failure. You're going to learn through, ooh, that didn't work, but sticking to your value system, right? And I, as someone who educates about child health, development, and parenting, I am very aware and cognizant of the fact that I don't want to give every step by step script to a family and feel like they have to say the script. And all my little scripts, I always put a little disclaimer. I'm like, if this doesn't feel natural to you, don't say it because it's going to be very obvious. And two, I want you to think about the value that you're bringing in this sort of script versus the actual words. Like, what is it that we're trying to embody here for the child? And I love that you said that because I completely agree. Being younger in this sort of parenting journey, I have a 5.5-year old and a 2-year old at the time of this recording, that I'm even myself knowing parenting and what I want, there are many moments where I turn to my husband and I'm like, what are we going to do in this situation? There's no book, there's nobody I'm messaging, nothing's happening there, but it's that moment of us figuring it out or me figuring it out alone if my husband's not there or he doesn't have any idea what to do. That is when you start to get that experience. And I love that you're bringing that up with the wisdom of having 45 years of mothering experience, but also your work in maternal ambivalence, because it's through that that I also think when you start to pivot that you start to become okay with failure, with the fact that things aren't always going to be perfect because you're doing it every day and learning that everything's fine. My kid's okay, I'm okay, but if you're not okay with that failure, then it becomes really hard to do that and feel comfortable in that discomfort.
that's right. And when you were just talking, two things came to my mind. First of all, when you talked about your husband, and
Mhm.
one of my main um, one of my main talking points is how important it is for mums at any stage, but particularly in the early part of their mothering, is to have a support system around them. And that means people that give you energy, that don't deplete you,
Yeah.
but that don't tell you what to do, but have your back. And I remember it was a long time ago. It was also 44 years ago. What happened in the old days? There was no cell phones then.
Mhm.
Okay, and what I did as a young mum, I was pretty young. I was 23 at that time, nearly 24. And what we would do is we had a small, what we call play group with about maybe 5 or 6 of us. It was my sister, a few family friends, and we would sit around every week in someone else's kitchen and just talk and talk about our problems or talk about feeding, talk about who was walking, who
Yeah.
wasn't walking. But it was so organic and
Yeah.
it was so reassuring and it was so, yeah, it was wholesome.
Yeah.
And I think today, I'm just going to go a little bit off track. I think the social media really, it's wonderful. Don't get me wrong. If we didn't have all this technology, you and I would not be talking now and not
Yes,
getting
exactly.
a word. But it kind of really divides us
Hmm.
because it splits us. And often mothers are either seen as perfect, wonderful, or as terrible, as crummy, as not caring. And really, we are both. And so we need to get that out that we're both. And instead of um, social media, which you also often would say will posture the mother as arriving at school fully coiffed with her children all in line, having like she's looking wonderful, she looks
Yeah.
like she has it all together. That's not true. Or the mother that's totally harassed all the time. That's not true. It's both. So what I'm saying here is how important it is, if we can, to gather ourselves, to gather around us people that really support us, that have our back. And I think as mums, we do have an antenna. We do know who is right for us. And I'm really entreating mums that if someone's not right, you've just got to kind of sideline them. Don't
Yeah.
have them in your life for that, because that can really be hurtful. The other part of what you said is we're not there's it's so important to be able to embrace the uncertainty of mothering, because it is uncertain, and that's okay. And I think we're often looking for a path of certainty, of that's right. We're not going to get that. And that's kind of the flow. And that's what we've got to learn about. And also, one really important aspect that is sometimes really hard to remember, but so important, is we've got to be humorous. We've got to laugh
Yes.
a little bit
Yes.
at ourselves, at our
Lighten up.
life
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Those things are not that important.
Yeah.
And I look back at it myself and I think I always it was so important to me to get my children to school every day on time. It was like panicking. And it was like, okay, it is important. But sometimes you slip up and sometimes you don't do it. And it's actually okay. And I have a 45-year-old, nearly 45-year-old. I've got a nearly 36-year-old and a nearly 28-year-old. So
Wow.
I
Yeah.
mothered every decade differently. I mean, I've mothered in 3 decades, which is unusual to mother in your when you're about 24, when you're about 35, and
You're
when you're
right.
41. But when I look back on it, I realized that my first 2 mothering experiences were rigid. I didn't really have room in myself to think about my mothering and to think about the dark, difficult. I wouldn't give myself permission to do that. The first situation, I was very young. The second situation, it was after a long experience of secondary infertility, 7 years. So there was no way I was going to think about that. But in my third experience, I had a daughter, and she was not going to let me get away with anything. Like she would question me. She would
Yeah.
make me, and she made me laugh because I
Yeah.
didn't have anything else. So there was no rigidity there. Or
Yeah.
if I felt myself getting rigid, she'd name it. And that was really, really inspired me to understand it and to really help people understand that rigidity and rules and regulations and perfection do not help.
Absolutely. Oh gosh, this is so much wisdom. I love it. I feel the same way. And it's just so nice to hear that and why this is so important for us, right? I mean, the rigidity, the stress. I mean, I give that guidance so often. I'm like, because I'm energy is very palpable to me. So if I'm in an exam room with a family and I sense that sort of stress about everything, right? The sleep, the feeding. And you even brought it up earlier that those early years can be really hard to tap into this, right? When the children have a lot more needs, but as someone who's been there twice and has younger children, I do believe that you can find this sort of acceptance and love for the ambivalence of motherhood early on as well, and how that can help you. And so I love that you brought that up. And one comment that is segueing me to another question is what you mentioned about social media. I love that it's given me the community that it's given me. I love that it's given me ways to connect with people like yourself, right? And have these conversations and put it on social, but using social media for good. But I also agree that there is a lot of toxicity there. And you mentioned that idealization of that perfect mom, right? The one that has the filter. All the kids are walking in line like little ducklings, like this, everyone's smiling, the picture perfect photos. I have heard this from so many of my community members that many women, they feel ashamed for simply being normal, right? Your hair up in a bun, all of that stuff. And how does acknowledging maternal ambivalence help mothers show themselves more compassion, and how does also just accepting the darker emotions, right? Like the guilt, the frustration, how do you feel that that can actually deepen and not weaken a mother's connection with her child? So talking about the power of ambivalence in connection and also in, compassion for self as well.
Okay, well, I think it goes back to understanding that we're human.
Hmm.
And and as mothers, we do we just we want to we it's very hard for us to accept that we're doing the best that we can. And I
Yeah.
this is such a powerful message. And as humans and as mothers, we are doing the best that we can, but we always want to do perfect. And
Yeah.
so in sense, we need to encourage mums to see that distinction. We're trying and we keep trying, and sometimes and often we're going to stumble, but this is what is human. And the real the the real twist there is that our, our children and us, we don't function as machines.
Hmm.
And that is actually also, I think, a very powerful image. We're not machines. We're people. We've got frailties. We've got cracks. We've got things that we don't like about ourselves, things that we do like about ourselves. We're the whole picture, and that's what we are. And as we need to understand that about ourselves, we're not a social media visual. We're
Absolutely.
actually humans, and as the side benefit of that, we need to teach our children that their cracks are lovable.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're annoying. we our
As are we, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's how we
Yeah.
but often they trigger us,
Yeah.
and there's also times it's also really important if we can recognize that we're being triggered. I think this is really, really, really important. If we can give ourselves time to respond rather than react. I talk about that a
Yeah.
lot in my book. It's really hard to, when we're feeling that frustration and anger, or even that exhaustion, and the exhaustion of how can I go on. It's like, let's give ourselves 10 or 20 seconds, in a sense, to restart. It's like giving ourselves a forgiveness that it's okay. And let's just like give ourselves the space. We don't have to respond straight away. Let's just give ourselves some space, because the other thing about that is, as mothers, especially young mothers, we are so time poor.
Yeah.
And so that's like the frame. Everything's quick. So we think that we need to give in to a demand or answer a demand straight away. And what I'm saying is, no, we don't. Let's slow ourselves down. And that's one of the memories of me, of myself as a young mother and an older mother. Everything was like boom, 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 boom. And I kind of got, when I think about it, I got myself into this situation. If I have to answer, I've got to, I've got to answer this demand straight away. No, it's okay. Let's give ourselves some space to think about it, because we get pressured. And I think this is the other thing. When I'm talking to you,
Yeah.
it's wonderful. And I'm thinking about all the other parts of my work, and I'm articulating them. And you know, we don't need to give in to pressure, social pressure, our children's pressure, our mother's pressure, our
Yeah.
partner's pressure, our friends' pressure. No, we've got to do it our way. All those outside influences can be great, but you know what? we actually know our child the best. And I think this is also the other part of my work that's so important. And as a new mum, you have doubts. Of course you do. This
Mhm.
is something, this is like, as you said, this is the most difficult thing. It's not like a job. This is the most difficult thing that we've ever faced. And it's the most wonderful and it's the most difficult.
Yeah,
So, we've got to give ourselves the belief that we know our child, and especially when we are doing hands-on mothering, because we're going to make mistakes, but no one knows our child better than us.
yeah.
This is our message. So we need to really lean into that belief and really understand that it's us. And people around us can help us, but we also need to know what advice, if that's what it is, to take and what feels right, and not to get swayed into something that's not genuine for us.
I love this. And I love that our conversation is inspiring you to think about your work even more. This is what I love about podcasting, Dr. Margo. Like, I love hearing people so passionate about the work that they do, because that's what I do in my space, and so I hear that from you. And it all ties in so beautifully. And for our listener who I think has put it together, but you had mentioned about that adding lightness, right? Adding humor. And I saw that in my own mothering, right? With my first and my second. I had the first in the pandemic, and then the second is out of a pandemic, and just the pandemic stress made me more stressed, right? And it showed up in how I mothered, right? I was more anxious, more rigid, all the things that you're talking about. And with my second, I'm way more light, right? There's more humor. And I've always been a humor driven person, but I feel that. And I think it came with that exact concept that you mentioned of being okay with not being perfect, right? Because when these mothers come out and they think that they're perfect and they think that they have to do X, Y, and Z, my kid has to sleep this way, my kid has to feed this way, all the check boxes that women put on themselves when they become moms, and then it's not happening, they don't have that space for humor, for lightness, because they're just living in this tensed up box of not having joy. I don't think you know this about my podcast, but in the pandemic, I did a series on my show, the podcast called Finding Joy. And each episode talked about how we need to let go of things that aren't serving us, whether it was perfectionism, people pleasing, the frustrations that we carry. And hearing you talk about this is like a reminder of the things that I was often telling my community and often telling myself as a
Yes,
new mom. And I think this is it, right? Like, I think the bottom line here that I'm hearing is that if we can be okay with the fact that you are not going to love every moment of motherhood, that you don't have to do love every moment. And you can say that it's okay that you need space, or you can say it's okay that I want to spend every moment with my kid. That okaying of the feeling makes you more light. And I think also lets you tap into that intuition that I think me and you both know that moms have, but they
yes.
lose because of this comparison and this judgment for self, I think.
That's exactly right. And
Mhm.
I think the intuition is so important. And that is really what makes us genuine. Like, this is what's important, not what the social, not what the maternal ideal says.
Yeah.
That's the one that has the very high bar, and anything that is around should. That's an ideal. And we really need to let go of that. It's hard. And as you say, with the first child, I mean, you had the whole thing because you had the pandemic. And that was like, that is really,
Yeah, a
really,
whole different experience. I know, yeah.
but you survived it. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's about surviving every day. And the other part of my work is that those difficult moments, and they're the ones that teach us, and they also melt us. They're those times, for example, when you're a new mum and you're coming home and the baby is awake and you're awake 3 or 4 or 5 times a night, and it's just so difficult, and then the baby gives you a smile,
Yeah.
and then you melt. And that is also really part of my work, to grab these melting moments, because they're the ones that get us to show up every day. I mean, it's like astounding when I look back and when I see young mums, they continue and we continue to show up every day. And
Yeah.
what's that about? And that's something that's so special about mothers. And when you said what's the difference between a mother and a father, and I'm not, and sometimes fathers are looking after the children. So I'm not including them, but I'm talking about mums. But really, what is it that allows us to show up every day? And what I'm saying is being more genuine and truthful to ourselves. That is what helps us show up every day. And also to grab those
Yeah.
moments of laughter, those moments of joy, those special moments when, say, for example, we lose our child in the mall for a second, and then we find the child, because we all have those moments when we horrified when we think we've lost our child. We've
Yeah.
all had those moments. And then when we see that child and we hug that child and
Yeah.
we're so annoyed that that child wandered away for a second, but when we hold that child in our arms, our love just takes over. And
Oh,
that's
yeah.
really important. Yeah, you get it.
I
You
get it,
get
and, I don't think because you obviously this is the first time you've been on my show and maybe you haven't listened to a lot of my episodes, but my entire embodiment of my show and my platform is understanding and normalizing how difficult parenting is, but also making sure that we look for the good, right? Because we cannot survive this if we are not looking for the good. And it's not dismissing the bad. And I think that's commonly misconceived of like, well, that means I'm toxic positivity and all that. But no, I very well have been through it. I have been through the hardest phases of my life as a mom, and I probably will go through those moments again. And I'm very aware of that being a pediatrician who takes care of newborns to 21. But I love I love when I have guests, and I didn't know that you would be like this until we chat, right? That embody that belief of this is hard work, but we need to find that joy. And it is important work that we do so that we can not just like fly through and look back and say what just happened. I want us to actually look at moments and say this was actually really awesome even through the newborn period, even when your toddler is 2 and throwing tantrums. I don't want you to keep wishing away their childhood. Like, that is how I look at my kids' childhood. I don't want them to just be getting older. I wanna look at this and say, "Yeah, you know what? I don't like when my 5.5-year-old is talking back to me, but I get to be his mother and guide him, and one day he's not gonna do that, and then I'm gonna miss it." I know it.
That's right. And we learn from our children. I mean,
Yes.
I look at, how much I've learnt from my children. But as you say, you've got to be there in the moment, and you've got to be able to take the difficult moments, but equally, we need to pat ourselves on the back
Oh, yeah.
when we survive something, when we survive a tantrum, when we survive a night, like nights of not sleeping,
Right.
when we survive when they're older and we still don't sleep, and it's more difficult when they're 16 or 17 and they're in the car driving around, and you don't know where they are, or you get that fear that something's happened to them. I mean, it's all like such a tapestry.
Yeah. What a great way to put that's a great word to describe it. It's like weaves in and out. There's so much to it. There's so much detail, and it's like all connected together. And I believe this, you believe it, and the philosophy here is we cannot normalize something we never talk about. And when it comes to these darker feelings, happier feelings, all of it. And I know so many women and moms are suffering. So for a listener who's just beginning to explore these feelings of maternal ambivalence, and now we've put this label if they've never heard this term, what's one powerful first step towards embracing and not hiding this emotional complexity of motherhood?
Okay, well, you just said it actually. You
Oh,
have to
perfect.
name the feeling.
Ah, yes.
And the thing about ambivalence is it's misunderstood and it
Mhm.
isn't named. So that's another very important part of my work. By naming it, by normalizing it, actually becomes okay, because there's something misunderstood and mysterious, and it's taboo. People don't want to go there. So, but I think it's such an essential part of mothering,
Yeah.
and it's part of the maternal language, and it hasn't been named. And by naming it, we're encouraging people to go into it and to explore it. And the more people that go into and explore it, the more normal and okay it is. So as mums, we also have a responsibility to talk about it and to normalize it for ourselves and for other mums. We're not in this alone. We're
Yeah.
all different and we're all unique, but it's really the same. And when you talk about we want to have a community around us,
Yeah.
whether it's my community when I was a young mum, of 5 people around a kitchen table, or what it is today. But we have to use our antennas to know who we bring into our community. I can't really stress that enough, that we need to have people that have our backs, not people that are trying to undermine us.
Yeah.
And, I think, we talked about suffering, and we all do suffer as mums, that's for sure. We suffer and we have the best experiences, but we really need to be strong enough to know who those people are that we surround ourselves with. Very, very
Absolutely.
important.
Absolutely. I call the term I created is uplifting realists. Like you need people who aren't going to sugarcoat things. Like you don't want a rah cheerleader that doesn't call you out on your, let's use the right word, bullshit, right? Like that you need to check your patterns, but you
Yes,
want someone who's on your team, right? So
that's right.
I love my uplifting realist friends. I don't need a friend who tells me, Mona, everything you do is great. I need a friend who's like, that's part of like if it's a parenting issue, whatever it is, like having that person is so vital. And Dr. Margo, I just have loved this conversation,
Oh,
and
me
I love it. I just think it's so nice again to be surprised by my guests. My listeners know this, but I don't do pre-interviews, and the purpose why I don't do pre-interviews with my guests is I want it to be a truly organic conversation. I want it to be like me and you just met for the first time, which we are, and I'm just blown away by how similar we are. Yet I didn't even know that that was going to happen, and so. Thank you. Where can everyone go to get your book, but also stay connected with the work that you're doing? And tell us all of that. And we will be attaching all of this to the show notes.
Okay. On my website, Margo at drmargolowy.com, everything's there. And also in my book is it's a someone called when I was on a podcast, someone called it a compassionate guide. And I really like that because it's compassionate, and that also speaks to how we have to be to ourselves
Yeah,
and our children and the community of mothers. We really need to be compassionate and forgiving. And that's part of the flow. And sometimes we're not compassionate and forgiving enough. So I guess that's my message, because that really encompasses everything.
love it. And again, when I have you speak about this is work that I'm doing with the, obviously being fresh into this world, 10 years practicing, 5 years as a mom. And it's work that I want to continue doing. And almost like I feel like you can pass that torch to me. Like you're still doing the work, but as you reach the end of your practice time, and I want you to know that I am embodying this for my community too. I feel this so strongly. I think the world needs this message. And so truly, thank you for joining me today. This
Thank
was so
you.
amazing.
Fantastic. Thank you. And one last thing before we
Yeah.
finish, I think that for mums to hear you as a pediatrician
Mhm.
to say that you have these difficulties
Oh,
and
yeah.
these struggles, I mean, that is so great for mothers. It makes it normal. It's ordinary. You're making this ordinary. You're not saying I'm perfect, I know everything, and that is so great for all mums to hear that.
I'm always shocked when I do share that because I am very authentic and that's who I am, like even before becoming a pediatrician. But when I share that and so many people DM me like on Instagram and they're like, it feels so good hearing a pediatrician say that. And it just reminds me that people do look at us like, I'm talking like pediatricians as, educated all together all the time. And although I am very professional and do know what I'm doing, I'm human, like you said, that going back to the conversation, every human being, every human mother, all of us
Yes,
feel and have these ambivalent feelings. And I love that. And I continue to do that. And you're right, it does resonate. And it also helps me, right, to share that with the world and say, listen, I feel good being honest with you all that I don't like this. I don't like solo parenting my kids 7 weekends in a row. And
yes,
it
yes.
doesn't make me a bad mom. I just love having company and I love having my husband around. And when I do that, it prompts people to say, yeah, I hate it too. And
Yes,
and it's okay to say that. It doesn't mean that you're a bad mom. So I love
exactly.
that final message.
That's it. Thank you so
Oh, well,
much.
okay, everyone tuning in, you probably love this conversation. And if you did, you have to make sure you hit that thumbs up sign on this video. You have to make sure you subscribe and share this conversation with mothers, fathers in your life. Just like Dr. Margo said, her book is focused around women. It doesn't mean that men can't find value in this, that men should get their own book about ambivalence, but they can take this messages home too, right? And we want this message to go far and wide, and we want the show to continue to grow so that I can continue to bring amazing guests and definitely Dr. Margo back, because the conversations we had today were just so amazing, and I cannot wait to chat with another guest next time.